If you guys want to put in the chat where you're from, how many kids you have, we're going to get started. We're going to let some more folks come in, and then we'll get started on the Q&A. Oh, Remy, you're in the Bay Area. Actually, Cheryl and I'm in the Bay Area, of course, but Cheryl is visiting.
I was, and I'm visiting.
That's right, in San Francisco right now.
I know you're seeing the view of the Bay Bridge. I'm not even sure. I think it's the Bay Bridge behind me.
You're in Glen Park, so right?
Actually, Diamond. I was corrected by my friend, whom I'm staying at her house. It's like Diamond Heights. It's not Glen Park.
Okay. Yeah. So you'd be looking. Yeah, you'd be looking at the Bay Bridge. So excellent.
Oh, we have
the weather hasn't been that warm for you, but right, Remy. I feel like it's been unseasonably cold, but
it's always cold in the Bay Area.
Yeah, this is a little cooler. I'm used to 70s, not 60s over the summer. So.
Oh, yeah. I went up to Sonoma last weekend. It was like 80s. It was perfect.
Well, that's perfect. Yeah, that is perfect. Yeah. Perfect. So we have Rachel from Colorado Springs.
Nice.
Chelsea from Illinois. Catalina from Toronto. Excellent.
Awesome.
It looks like maybe you guys have little kiddos. Paige is from Pensacola, so that might be probably really hot by you. Miami.
Miami. Woohoo.
Yeah. My kids are teenagers now. They're Bodhi is going to be 14 in just about exactly 1 month. And then Kenzie is 15 and a half. And
wow.
we have tiny health kits waiting to do, except Bodhi just had to be on antibiotics very sadly for a really bad skin infection from scraping the bottom of my sister's pool. So I saw it, and I tried some natural things, but it was not good. So he's on the mend, but I figure this will be a good time to get his tiny health test done. So.
Yeah.
Kathy doesn't have kids, but yes, tiny health is for all ages, right? I mean, that's Peter and I, my husband and I, are doing tiny health for us as well. So.
Yeah, the gut-brain issues, we want to look at the GABA marker, their production and breakdown. And the reason why we want to have, I'm already jumping into it, like the two components, because there are very few gut tests that show the GABA marker, but for those who do, they only show GABA production. But we show both because there's a component of like producing the GABA molecules, and then there's the component that breaks it down. So you want it to produce a lot of GABA molecules, and you don't want it to break it down too much as well. So you have sufficient amounts to have that Zen-like calming molecule for your brain health and things like that. So anyway, tidbit there. So shall we officially kick it off? We're 4 minutes in.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just gonna do the formal intros. Hi everyone, welcome, and I'm Cheryl Sew Hoy, the founder and CEO of Tiny Health. Really happy you can join us today for our Tiny Plus exclusive AMA with our amazing Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Elisa Song. But yeah, before we dive in, we already kind of took a moment to acknowledge and get to know each other, where we're from, whether or not you have kids, and what age. So if you're comfortable, for those of you who haven't introduced yourself, feel free to holler in the chat. Just first name, where you're joining from, and even if you can share with us how recently you did your last Tiny Health test, whether it's gut or vaginal. A lot of people don't realize we have a vaginal test, but it is a very robust vaginal test, and our gut test is for all ages. And we are, our team actually has been working on a lot of longevity health markers for older folks, and we actually just even launched a research edition on the aging microbiome. So taking in microbiome samples from folks who are 60 and above. So we want to be categorizing what an aging microbiome looks like through centenarians to see if there's a pattern there. So very, very exciting stuff. Before we dive into the AMA, Elisa, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your background? If you
Well, we
who,
have some slides we can go through too, right?
yeah,
So you guys can just see who I am. I'm an integrated pediatrician in the Bay Area in San Francisco. I'm just down here in Belmont. I see, and I am chief medical officer of Tiny Health. Super honored to be chief medical officer. I have a practice here, private practice, which is I mean, right now, technically closed to new patients, which is why I started my online educational platform, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids. So, and I'm the author of a book titled the same, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, An Integrated Pediatrician's Guide to Whole Child Resilience, which the foundation is the microbiome. It's all about how do we set up your child's and your microbiome, your family's microbiome for optimal health, whether you're healthy in the moment or have some health concerns to work on. So, grateful to be here and answer any questions you guys have. And then, as I said, I'm a mom. This is a very old picture. They're teenagers now. In fact, my daughter just took her first driving test yesterday. So we're in sort of a different stage, but still really great, and still fun. The teenagers can be awesome. Different challenges, right? And this is Cheryl. You know Cheryl.
yeah. So I started Tiny Health from my own, my two different births. Initially with my C-section born daughter 7 years ago. She just turned 7 a few months ago, and then she ended up having eczema, some food sensitivities. She still has gluten and dairy intolerances, but I'm healing her gut now through our testing. Um, and she's having some hay fever right now and things like that. So it's a journey from sort of not being exposed to my vaginal microbes at birth and also being exposed to the antibiotics during the C-section. So that was kind of why I started Tiny Health. I actually incorporated the company when my second child was only a week old because I was so compelled by the research and evidence around the first 1,000 days and how you can really heal your child's gut in a very critical time window of immune training in the first 1,000 days. So my son ended up being a vaginal birth at home, a VBAC in California. But it was during the pandemic. It was at the start of the pandemic in 2020. And he ended up having a perfect microbiome at birth and beyond. And he doesn't have any of these chronic conditions. I just had my third. He's 5 months old in Brooklyn. And his microbiome is also doing really well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to starting solids with him next month, and all that adventure. So yeah, I'm a mom of 3 now. And, like when we started Tiny Health, I have to credit my husband for inspiring me with the name Tiny. We'd always meant to start with the flagship product, which is the baby gut test under 3. So, but our vision has from day one always been for adults too. So tiny doesn't just mean tiny babies. Frankly, it means the tiny invisible microbes in your gut or your vaginal microbiome that is a big part of your immune system, immune health. And so the Tiny Health brand really is expandable. So if you are here without kids, or you're in your elderly age, I just talked about longevity, aging microbiome kind of research, this is the right place for you as well. I've always been a big believer in holistic medicine, functional integrative medicine. And that's how I found Dr. Elisa Song. I've been following her work and she's been talking about gut health the whole time. And I'm just so, so honored that she's now part of our team. And here with us today, we're so lucky to have her answer anything that you guys want to ask, as long as it's not too, personal and too much health information. But as far as generally, we can answer questions about metrics and sort of what it means broadly. And anything if you want to ask Dr. Lisa about how she keeps so young and healthy and beautiful and gorgeous, you can. So this is how the AMA will work. Throughout our time together, feel free to use the chat for discussion. But if you have a specific question for Elisa or myself, please don't put it in the chat panel because we're not going to kind of answer questions from there. Instead, use the Q&A panel. You'll find a Q&A panel right next to the chat column and on the right side of your screen. And then you can also upvote vote questions submitted by other people so we can prioritize what's most helpful for the whole group. Okay. And so at the end of the time, we will send you a brief feedback survey. So please fill this out. And we'll draw one name from all the submissions to receive a free copy of Elisa's latest book, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, if you haven't already got it yourself, because it's a very popular book and lots of great advice and tips and recipes in there. It's very yummy. So don't forget to give us feedback to get your name drawn for this book. All right, so we're going to dive in here. A few of you have pre-submitted questions. So Lisa, I'm going to ask 2 questions to kick us off.
Okay.
The first one, is it possible to fully, I'm going to ask the 2 questions and you can answer them. Number 1, is it possible to fully heal or get rid of a baby's eczema and food allergies? Ooh, that's a loaded one. And second, I love this question. Do you see medical uses for microbiome reports in the near future? Should pediatricians be using this data, and how can families advocate for it? Amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah, so I'll answer the first question. Is it possible to fully heal or get rid of a baby's eczema and food allergies? And I will say I would like to separate those out, okay? Because with food allergies, if they are anaphylactic food allergies, they can be challenging, and I don't know that anyone would say can necessarily fully heal them. However, I will say I've had kids who, when we've worked on the gut and worked on their immune system and their gut immune system connection, many of their allergies have dissipated, right? And they can tolerate the foods again. So, but if it's a true food allergy, meaning a food allergy that's mediated by an antibody called an IgE antibody, that's the kind where if you go to an allergist, they'll do a skin scratch test or do a blood IgE test for. That is something that we want to work closely with an allergist to work on supporting your child in a safe way so that they don't develop any, really serious reactions while we're trying to introduce solids. So hopefully that makes sense. Now with eczema, absolutely. And working on the gut microbiome, making sure that the microbes are balanced. Oftentimes we'll see for babies, if they have eczema, we'll see a different pattern of abnormal bacteria in the gut, these disruptive microbes, and oftentimes too little of the beneficial microbes. And so bringing that to balance, reducing inflammation. I always look at, for a baby with eczema, always start with the gut. Right. We have to balance the gut because the gut microbiome is the foundation for the developing immune system and immune regulation and immune tolerance. And then I also think, well, what else could a baby with eczema be missing? And oftentimes babies with eczema, and goes the same with children, teenagers, and adults with eczema, they are missing certain nutrients for skin repair. And those include things like zinc and omega-3 fatty acids, or your fish oils, and a beneficial omega-6 called GLA, gamma linolenic acid, and vitamin D. So I have kind of a comprehensive, but the gut is the foundation. So absolutely, when we do start with the gut microbiome and we kind of dive into, what else could be going on, sometimes working, balancing the gut microbiome, that's enough, right? But I think I saw a question on, well, what if, how do we keep, or I've had some kids where we balance the microbiome, but there's still some concerns. And then I look at, okay, what are are there, detergents or, irritants that they're reacting to topically, and again, the nutrient insufficiencies to optimize. As far as the medical uses for microbiome reports in the near future, I mean, that's what we're working on here at Tiny Health. I mean, I think, Cheryl and I share the same goal. We would love to see Tiny Health as the standard of testing and care in every single nursery, hospital nursery in the United States. I mean, really, frankly, for that matter, all over the world. But Tiny Health, as many of you guys know, is the only microbiome testing company, that has markers and reference ranges relevant for infants and children. And the only microbiome testing company that really incorporates the latest research with the gold standard, shotgun metagenomics testing, and can really take a look at potential risk factors for future conditions. And I'm going to answer, there's a question on what do these risk condition factors mean, right? There's one question on, if your test shows up with a risk condition biomarker for, let's say, eczema or thyroid disease, it does not mean that you necessarily will develop that or have that disease, but it means that your microbiome patterning is showing potential risk factors for these. So this is a golden opportunity. Let's say we have a baby who is showing a risk for allergies or, or eczema. If we correct their microbiome and restore, then we can oftentimes prevent that risk. So how do we then get this into every pediatrician's office? I mean, for now, the first step is making sure that functional medicine practitioners and integrated practitioners understand that Tiny Health is really the only test that they should be using. And it's sort of the newer kid on the block, but rapidly becoming the gold standard for functional medicine practitioners. We're actively working with different hospital systems to get research done and trying to get panels into different hospital systems. And I think once that happens, then conventional pediatricians will realize, okay, this should be something that we can incorporate. For now, if you have a pediatrician who's open, and I have several conventional pediatricians who have reached out, especially after reading my book and seeing all the research there, and seeing the actionable items that we can take from microbiome testing, have really opened their eyes and their minds and been more open to maybe, not necessarily at the moment recommending the testing just yet, but looking at it, right? And working alongside, you and the Tiny Health coaches or your functional practitioner.
Yeah, and I may add, so to add on to what Elisa mentioned, we do have a stream here at Tiny Health internally to get this to standard of care for the first 1,000 days. So starting with infants and then moving upstream to maternal health, prenatal health. As you can imagine, it's a long timeline, right? It takes, we just completed our infant restore study, which showed, because we're Tiny Plus members here, it showed a 70% reduction in atopic conditions in an intervention group who did a Tiny Health test. And then it was just exactly like what you did. It was sort of more self-serve. There was a health coaching component, but parents took action based on what they felt like, they learned from the report. It wasn't like, prescribed or anything like that, versus the control group who did the gut test for their babies, but didn't get the reports back. So 70% reduction in eczema and allergies is huge. So that study was a decent size. It was 52, the N was 52, and two groups. So we actually now are replicating that study to a much larger group, a few hundred babies, and partnering with the hospital system. So this is going to be a longer study. We're going to track these babies for a little bit longer, over 2 years. So as you can imagine, we have to wait for this larger study to then be completed and then kind of work with clinicians, pediatricians to kind of like push this forward to get it reimbursable and things like that, and standard of care, right? Like if you go take your child to a pediatrician, you're doing the growth chart with the WHO weight and height chart. And then the third one should be a Tiny Health baby gut test, right? That's the vision. It's just going to be a long road. However, as Elisa mentioned, if you are working with a pediatrician or even any sort of like doctor and you're doing a Tiny Health test, it is still great for you to mention Tiny Health and show your results if you can, if they're open to hearing about it. We've gotten some feedback that some, pediatricians would just kind of dismiss it and say, oh, it's like a horoscope. But, I reassure you, it's not like a horoscope. A lot of you have done a test with us before for your child, and we've helped so many kids, not just babies. It is definitely more impactful for infants under 1 year old because their guts that is really the time window, right? But we've also helped older kids with even severe allergies and asthma and things like that. May not be able to reverse those conditions in the later time point, but we have helped with symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And so when you keep bringing these results and the impact, the clinical impact and the symptoms reducing, eventually doctors will pay attention. And we have really quite a few doctors, conventional doctors, who have come to us and was like, I don't know how you guys did it, but we've tried everything under the sun. And after our patient did your tests, they just magically, their symptoms went away because they were taking the wrong probiotics before, or they were not eating the right kinds of foods to support their gut health. So we can't help everyone. It's not like perfect. It's not 100%. And Elisa will tell you it's not a magic bullet of one thing or two things, right? It's a whole lifestyle change. So, it's sometimes, again, depending on how severe the conditions are, it may take a longer time to work on those gut issues from the root cause, right? But keep talking about us to your doctors. Even if you're an adult, we have had IBD, all right, people with IBD and Crohn's disease do our tests who are adults and feel much better, and they take it to their GI doctors, and then that's how we get the word out. So be an advocate for tiny health, where we would be really appreciative. And then we would always talk with doctors. We actually have a whole team, a clinical success and healthcare practice team, who actually give free education to providers and practitioners who want to learn about our testing and how to interpret it. And we share our white papers, our publications, our evidence, and all that with them to get it on board. So definitely invite your doctors to come and speak to us. You can email us at practitioners@tinyhealth.com if you want to introduce this to your doctors.
I see a bunch of questions that are kind of related. So I want to just quickly go through. One is going to be super easy. Brand recommendations for GLA. So gamma linolenic acid is a beneficial omega-6 fatty acid that is derived from borage oil, evening primrose oil, black currant oil, and in the studies looking at eczema, asthma, and also autoimmunity, GLA is really important. So this is where you'll find combination 369 fish oils. So Nordic Naturals has it's called Pro Omega Complete. That is a 369. It comes in a liquid and capsules. And for a specific GLA, I use the Nordic Naturals Nordic GLA. So that's just plain gamma linolenic acid. So if you have a fish oil that you really like for your kids, then you can just add in the liquid GLA. For capsules, Designs for Health has a capsule called GLA 240. Okay, so that's, if you have eczema or asthma, that's what I would use. And then, a follow on to that, I see Sally's question: is there anything specifically we can do to prevent asthma? Because we know this atopic march, many kids with eczema may progress onto asthma, or may progress onto at least having some wheezing when their kids get a cold. So reactive airway disease, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have chronic asthma for the rest of their life. And I would say everything you're doing with Tiny Health, Sally, is the best thing, right? When we build up bifidobacteria, when we support a healthy balance of beneficial microbes, making sure that abnormal microbes like your strep or staph in the gut, or Klebsiella, Citrobacter, those disruptive microbes are low, is going to be the best way to prevent that atopic march, it's called. Okay, so that would be great. And I see that your baby has Trina allergies, peanut and egg. I don't know where this question is, but I saw a question on, well, what if your child has allergies, and now they're tolerating the foods, should you continue those foods even though they're still causing a little bit of inflammation? And that sort of, I want to clarify that, because this is such an important question. If your child has had IgE allergies, meaning these more potentially higher risk allergies to, let's say, tree nuts or eggs, and now they've sort of, quote, outgrown them and they can tolerate them, but it's causing a little bit of eczema. If they're IgE allergies and you're working with an allergist, I do think it's important to continue to eat those foods, right? Even though we know that they're causing some inflammation, you just want to keep working on their gut and keep working on immune support with the omega 369 fish oils and vitamin D, because for those IgE allergies, once you tolerate them, kids really need to have them on a regular basis so that they don't go back and develop further higher allergy to them. If it's a food sensitivity, like if your child is, is not anaphylactic to gluten or dairy, but they're sensitive, then those food sensitivities are ones that we do eliminate for a period of 2 to 3 months while we are trying to heal your child's gut. And that's, and I do explain this in a lot more detail in my book, but that is, for me, IgE allergies, we still keep them on so that we maintain that tolerance. Sensitivities, or what might be IgG sensitivities, I will eliminate those for a few months so that we can really help support, a calming of the immune system and healing of the gut. Okay. And then the question also was with the topical for flares. Of course, we don't necessarily want to lather on steroids, but sometimes they're necessary, right? And so if it's really, really a huge flare, then I would want to make sure, talk with your dermatologist or pediatrician. You can do a skin swab, on the hot spots on their cheeks. Make sure that there's not bacteria like staph that's overgrowing. Make sure there's not yeast that maybe needs to be treated with either a topical antibacterial or antifungal cream. But then the best cream that I found is by Yobee, Yobee. Yobee was actually started by a pediatric allergy immunologist, Dr. Ruchi Gupta, and she, in her laboratory, after working with so many kids with eczema and her own child, developed this cream that actually has what's called a parabiotic, and manuka honey, which can help kill staph that's often colonized on the skin of kids with eczema. And it has a B vitamin in there and some turmeric. So it's really great for soothing the skin, healing the skin, without disrupting the skin microbiome, because we also have to know that our skin has a healthy gut microbiome that's often disrupted for children with eczema.
Lisa, if you go to the priority section, those are the upvoted questions.
Oh, great. Okay, I didn't see that. So we answered that question. What impact does mold exposure have on the gut microbiome? So that is a really great question, Naomi. I mean, mold, can then pave the way to colonization of your sinuses, respiratory tract, your gut with fungal species. Now, Tiny Health does test for yeast and fungi, but we have to remember that these are large intestinal microbes that we're testing for, and oftentimes the colonization occurs higher up. So I actually do test a nasal swab just to see, is there any potential sinus colonization with molds, and I actually do often grow out sometimes really bizarre molds that are growing in the sinus passages. I do think many kids are colonized with mold or yeast, but higher up, because I have questions. Well, there's one question sometimes on a urine organic acid test, we'll see yeast markers there, like an arabinose that's really high, but it's not showing up in the gut. Well, these yeast can colonize higher up. Right. And we also, and yeast make up such a tiny part overall. Our mycobiome, is a relatively small part of our microbiome. But so if I'm really suspicious of yeast colonization, if there are symptoms of yeast overgrowth, if there's been mold exposures, if the urine organic acid test is showing high yeast markers, then that tells me there's likely colonization, but not necessarily in the large intestine. So I use both sets of kind of clinical data, urine organic acid test, and tiny health testing to then balance the large intestinal microbiome, and then I will treat for yeast dysbiosis, regardless, because we have the clinical data or the urine organic acid test. And then I actually also often will compound an antifungal nasal spray, an itraconazole nasal spray, if there's sinus colonization. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, let's see. How quickly can the Tiny Health test results shift based on gut health status day to day? If you take the Tiny Health test while experiencing GI disruption or flare up, will it look dramatically different a week later, or does it take months for change to occur during and after a GI disruption event? That's a great question. I mean, I will liken this to, an antibiotic, right? For instance, my son is on antibiotics right now, and that's a huge disruption to the gut microbiome, right? And or a dietary change. If you go on vacation and all of a sudden, let's say you don't have an Airbnb and you're eating out and your kids are, with I mean, I don't want to throw grandparents under the bus, but I know when my kids were with my parents, oftentimes they would be loaded with, sugar and artificial things that I that I wouldn't feed them in my house, right? So I knew that their gut would be disrupted. So typically after a big disruption or flare up, if I want to see what the baseline is, remember that your gut microbiome has a certain state of resilience, which we can now measure in the Tiny Health test. Now, what that means is, how likely is your gut microbiome, going to be resilient to shifting back to, your baseline state of health, even after disruption. So I typically like to wait about a month after a disruptive event because it will look different. I mean, I have had kids, test, even conventionally, do stool tests through a lab, with, after they have a prolonged bout of diarrhea, because I'm just wondering, are there some parasites or norovirus or something? And they definitely have inflammatory markers that are elevated and their gut is off. But I'm not going to use that to base an entire microbiome reset plan, right? I'll get them over that disruptive event and then do tiny health testing to see, okay, what now do we have to do to really restore health?
Yeah. But if there's no GI event, with using the shotgun technology, because we're measuring the DNA of the microbe, it is pretty stable if there's no major change in diet or supplements or lifestyle change or travel or sickness. We have a lot of people who want to just test us. They do one day after another of stool tests, and it comes back identical. And using our data science, we can actually see that it is the same person, but yeah, of course, if you have a GI event, then it would be better to wait till it returns to baseline before you want to measure it again.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. The next priority question I
Angie,
see.
parasites.
The parasites. Okay, can you please talk about parasites? I'm convinced that my 11-year-old has a serious infestation. I've given him herbs to kill them, but I think that was cut off. But so we do test for parasites on Tiny Health. There always is. I've been doing this for 21 years now, right? I've had my integrative practice since 2004, and there's always something or some clinical thing that becomes the diagnosis, of the day, right? That everything is blamed on. I mean, it used to be everything was blamed on yeast, or everything was blamed on MTHFR, and now it seems everything is being blamed on parasites. So
Exactly.
now, having been doing this for a couple of decades, I realized, okay, those can always be part of the mix, but I hesitate to go after one thing alone because there's overall balancing that just has to happen. So when do I think about treating parasites? Because parasites can be hard to detect. And sometimes, parasites are not going to be very active at the time that you're collecting stool. I typically, and Cheryl, I know there's not really a science to this, but I actually recommend that parents, if they're really concerned about parasites, then to do the collection around the time of the full moon, because all animals are, sensitive to the moon cycles, right? Animals in the wild will give birth around the full moon. And my mom was an OBGYN, and she knew never to schedule vacations around the full moon because she would be slammed in the
That
hospital.
is so funny. That's what my midwife said. She was like, "Oh my gosh," because I was like, "I don't know when my son would come," and he ended up coming about 3 weeks early, and it was around the full moon.
It's true.
She
It's
said
true.
+/- 3 days, and she's
Yeah.
like, "There's a pattern with all her patients and a lot of
It
births."
really is, yeah. Which, I mean, it sounds so bizarre, but even for instance, if your child has an itchy bottom and you do the flashlight test to see are there pinworms around their anus, early in the morning, if you don't see them right away, then wait till the full moon because that's when you'll often see them. And so,
Perfect.
same thing with ER docs. You ask any ER doc, they're like, okay, they don't want to shift around the full moon because it's going to be crazy. So, and I've seen this with kids okay, so from a clinical standpoint, where whatever symptoms, and oftentimes they are behavioral concerns like more tantrums or tics, like eye blinking or shoulder shrugging, or whatever symptoms. If you notice a kind of a cyclical pattern that seems like maybe it's correlated with the full moon, then I'm suspicious that maybe there's some parasites that are acting up then that are just kind of dormant, uh, in like ova form, egg form, and not parasite form, when we're testing. So then I might, do a parasite quote cleanse. But also, for kids, they don't need really like heavy duty, intensive, aggressive antimicrobial treatments for the most part, right? For babies, for sure, a little bit of movement, sometimes a little bit of herbs is enough to move them in the right direction. And I do worry that many of these parasite cleanses are not just, necessarily wiping out the bad stuff, but wiping out all the good stuff right along with it. I mean, we have to know, I mean, antibiotics for sure, will wipe out, very quickly many of the beneficial microbes while preserving some of the disruptive microbes. But a strong anti-herbal regimen can do the same thing. So I think in that sense, less is more, and then working really on diet and lifestyle, what I call the 5 things for microbiome magic, really honing in on that to create a healthy ecosystem where parasites are like, there's nothing here for me. I don't want to stay, right? And really creating that friendly neighborhood where only the good bugs want to stay is even more important than just the killing, killing, killing.
Mhm. And also, fun fact, the one parasite, specifically Busticidus, there's new emerging evidence that it's not all bad. And in fact, it's connected to a healthier diet. There's a publication, I think we might have linked it in the Tiny Health Tests under Busticidus. And it's also linked to people who have slimmer figures. I don't know if it's TMI, but Hannah has it. My mom has it, and she's kind of very slim, and she eats a healthy diet. My mom-in-law has it, and it's perfectly normal and not harmful. But you don't want to see large amounts, right? If it's colonizing in quite like a large amount, or if you have other parasites like Giardia, you don't want that. So it really depends what kinds of parasites too.
Yeah. There's a question I see. This has a lot of votes. Could gut health affect sleep? I mean, I'm 1000% because most of our neurotransmitters are actually made by our gut microbes if we have the right gut microbes that make them. And your gut, I was astounded at this fact when I was researching for the book, that your gut microbiome actually makes 400 times the melatonin than your brain does. And so we need a healthy gut. And also, your gut microbiome makes at least like 90 percent of the serotonin in our body. And serotonin we think of as, helping with anxiety and calm and our mood. But serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. So all of that, we need to make sure, if you're having trouble sleeping, I want to make sure that your gut microbiome is healthy, because your gut microbiome has its own circadian rhythm, and their circadian rhythm impacts our circadian rhythm. So all of these effects, but yeah, I mean, oftentimes people will find once they balance out their gut microbes, their mood is better and their sleep is better. Okay, so
Back to the top to Rachel's question.
Rachel's question. Okay, what do you recommend an expecting mother do for gut health when trying to conceive and during pregnancy? I have leaky gut and some yeast issues, so trying to support my body for next baby. I love this. I love optimizing your gut before you conceive. I mean, and also I just want to put a plug in. It's not just about the mother's gut. It really is also about the father's gut too. Prenatally, before conception. This is a rat study, but they found that, in rats, the male, the parent, the dad's microbiome before pregnancy can actually impact pregnancy outcomes like risks for preeclampsia, preterm delivery, birth weight, even, and baby outcomes even once the baby's born. So it's got to be a family affair. And I would say, in terms of healing your leaky gut and with yeast issues, if you look at, and all of the 5 things for microbiome magic, I mean, honing in on really getting rid of the emulsifiers and the food additives in your packaged food that are so disruptive to the gut microbiome, really prioritizing getting in, 30 plus plants per week in your diet, getting at least minimum 25 grams of fiber in a day, getting in your healthy omega-3s, fatty acids, through diet or fish oils. I mean, all of those things are going to, and of course, optimizing your gut and your vaginal health.
Mhm.
Your vaginal health too are going to make it so much easier to conceive, and you're going to have such a healthier pregnancy. So so I would do start with the tiny health gut test and vaginal test to see where can I optimize, and then you'll just have such an easier time, with fertility and pregnancy outcomes.
Yeah, and coming back to the dad, there's new papers showing that dads contribute 20% of their microbiome at birth in the early days. If mom had a vaginal birth, I think it's like 75% on average. It could be higher. But if the mom had a C-section, she's contributing about 20% to child. So if C-section, the dad plays just as an important role to seed the baby with his microbiome as the mom during birth. So check in with the partner, the dad as well. Their microbiome matters too.
It does. And then even honestly after they're born, because, once like beyond the first 1,000 days, or even, in those first 1,000 days, I mean, we know that the way babies were born and the way they were fed initially, antibiotic exposure, all of that impacts the baby's developing gut microbiome. But, as we get older, our microbiomes are in some studies up to 40% affected by the microbiomes of the people that we live with. Right. And
Yeah.
so, even the pets that we have. So,
Yep.
making sure it really is a family affair. I
One
mean,
day we will come up with a pet microbiome test, like a dog
that
and
would be
cat.
awesome.
Our team has been like asking for it, and there is a way to do it. It's just, one day, maybe next year.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Well,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it has to be a family affair. So, I have families where maybe one child is sick, whether it's with PANS or PANDAS or an autoimmune condition or eczema or asthma. And, we're doing so much work on optimizing their gut microbiome, and really, we have to look at the whole family, because, we often find microbiomes are shared, but even still, there can be, like, for instance, if I have a kiddo who, let's say, has too much Klebsiella and they have an autoimmune condition, and that can be linked. And sometimes we'll treat and see that the Klebsiella is gone, but it comes right back, and then I know someone is re-exposing this child, and so we want to make sure that we're testing the whole family.
I want to answer Chelsea's question again, because I think the conditions section is may not be the most obvious to a lot of people. So if you open if you go scroll down your results and metrics related to conditions in the adult section, there's chronic constipation, menopause, hypertension. So for example, menopause, if you're a man and you took a tiny health test, and it doesn't mean you have menopause if you have a lot of reds, and things like that. What it really just means is if you click into one of these conditions, you'll see papers on the bottom. We've taken these high quality papers, mostly based on human studies, not mice studies, and taken associations in the microbiome with that condition. So menopause, for example, if you have a lot of reds and very few greens, it just means that if you're at that age and you do have perimenopausal symptoms, you may have more hot flashes and more vaginal dryness and more of those symptoms, right? If you have very few reds and a lot of greens, that means you're going to have fewer symptoms. Similarly, for thyroid disease or gluten intolerance, it just means that your gut microbiome may be more susceptible towards these symptoms. If you're eating gluten and you have a lot of reds, for example, if it's just one, and then it may not be an issue, but we believe there's always a way to improve your gut microbiome, right? So for example, if you only have one red in gluten intolerance, and the rest are green, you're probably okay. But if you are feeling this uncomfortable eating gluten, then you may want to click on the red. You'll see one metric action or whatever metric actions associated with that red. Click into it, and we will give you some support on what you can do to get that back to a green so that you will feel less symptoms. Hopefully that answers your question. So that's how I would use that condition section.
Okay, so Megan asks, why do some probiotics cause babies' eczema to flare? And I have to say, this is not uncommon. Okay, so I'm glad that you asked this, Megan. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, some strains in probiotic strains are known to produce histamine. Right. So that could be one potential. Now, of course, in your tiny health test, you're going to see, does your baby currently have any high level histamine producing species in your gut? But that's one possibility. So then using a probiotic that is lower in histamine, like, as far as brands go, Seeking Health is a company that has one low histamine probiotic called Probiota Histamine X. Okay, Probiota Histamine X by Seeking Health. And then also Custom Probiotics has a low histamine probiotic. And I believe Smidges might be low histamine, but you'll have to
There's
Cheryl.
this niche sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be one cause. Sometimes with probiotics, because we know that probiotics can, the beneficial flora can start pushing out abnormal, disruptive flora. So sometimes what I'll see is if the probiotics are actually, killing off some of the disruptive flora, there's a little bit of an upheaval and some flare before things get better. So that could also be it too. And then finally, sometimes like some probiotics will have certain prebiotics that maybe it's actually the prebiotics that your child is reacting to. So then really for babies, they really mostly just need the HMO prebiotics, the human milk oligosaccharides that are found in Begin Health prebiotics, and also Layer Origin has their their prebiotic for kids. So maybe that. So there may be a few reasons there. So that'd be great.
Lisa, I recently discovered through a user Kepos HMOs. Have you heard of that brand?
No, how do you spell it?
Kepos.
Uh-uh.
It looks like kind of very clean. We haven't had an experience with it, but we have had some users ask about it, and yeah, very interesting. That we're happy there's more HMO companies. It is more expensive, but we do know Begin Health and Layer Origin works pretty well. But in case you're wondering, it seems more catered to adults, the Kepos brand.
I will totally look at that. Oh, so and Cheryl just had a really good point. A lot of us think, oh, HMOs, they're the most predominant prebiotic found in breast milk. Is it only for kids? And there's actually a lot of emerging research on using HMOs for adults. I mean, I saw an article on HMOs reducing, I think it was reducing adult anxiety and of course adult gut symptoms. And what we know through testing is that many adults are also deficient or insufficient in bifidobacteria, which is so important, obviously key and essential for infant health, but also very important for adult health. So I think that's why we're finding some of the benefits. So it's not surprising to me that we're going to see some HMO products that are really geared towards adults. I mean, Layer Origin, their first flagship product was an HMO for adults.
Yeah. And kind of like, again, back to Rachel Clark's question about what do you do for gut health at TTC? Actually, if you do a tiny health test, we do want to look for those bifidobacteria during pregnancy or TTC, not just any bifidobacteria, but for HMO degraders that you should be passing on to your infant. So we look for that. Archimantria is important for avoidance of atopic conditions for your infant, and then lactobacillus for your vaginal microbiome.
Yep. Okay, so Joshua asked about a medical keto diet for juvenile bipolar disorder. Are there any complementary practices in general? Do you have any tips or things to look out for? Now, one of the things with keto is, of course, um, I mean, and I've had kids, on the autism spectrum or with seizure disorders do very well on a medical ketogenic diet, right? That is followed, and you have to be really careful. I've had to run supplements by the dietitian to make sure that the kids will still be able to maintain their keto diet. What I would want to for me, if it were my patient on a ketogenic diet, I would wanna do, something like, a Genova urine organic acid test or, Mosaic Diagnostics urine organic acid test to see are there signs of, nutrient deficiencies. I'd also want to measure, things like a vitamin D and B vitamin status, you can't really measure fiber, but, fiber is often deficient, or insufficient on a medical keto diet. And fiber is what is so important to feed our beneficial gut microbes. So when we're thinking about, juvenile bipolar disorder, mental health disorders, neurodevelopmental concerns, we want to, of course, support the gut microbiome, but we're looking at the fiber piece that might be if you can work with your dietitian to get enough of that in.
Yeah.
And you know
Actually, in the Tiny Health test, there's a whole section of fiber digestion.
Yep,
So you
mhm.
have the bugs to digest certain types of fiber, which is a precursor for butyrate function. So, like your short chain fatty acids, which is found in a lot of kiddos with mental health issues. Butyrate function is often very low because they may not have the fiber digestion functions, actually.
Yeah. Well, and then, the tiny L testing right now measures GABA production and GABA breakdown, but I found for, some of my kids with mental health concerns, that's really key because if their GABA production is very low, or their GABA breakdown is very high, then I mean, brains need GABA for that calming support. So, supplementing with GABA or using a probiotic that has a bifidobacter that increases GABA production can be really beneficial. Because remember, all of our neurotransmitters really rely on those healthy levels of bifidobacteria.
Mhm.
So I hope that helps. I mean, I don't have a huge amount of experience with medical keto, but I do look out for nutrient deficiencies that may not necessarily be measured from a conventional standpoint.
Mhm.
Um, can you explain the impact of pancreatic insufficiency on protein breakdown and gut health? What are some causes for pancreatic insufficiency in a child? Pancreatic insufficiency is very common. I'm seeing it more and more in kids and teenagers and adults. I mean, stress alone can cause pancreatic insufficiency. Of course, dysbiotic microbes, an imbalance of microbes. I've seen, high levels of disruptive gut microbes also affect pancreatic function. Sometimes pancreatic insufficiency will run in the families where I'll have, a mom who isn't digesting, fats well, and that kind of, we see that in several of the kids. But I often find when we balance out the microbes, that pancreatic insufficiency will improve and we'll get, pancreatic elastase, which is in the pro test, not the baseline test, but pancreatic elastase will start to normalize. I had this one mom who I was helping her with, and her pancreatic elastase was so low that I was concerned. I referred her to a gastroenterologist who diagnosed her with EPI, exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, and put her on prescription, pancreatic enzymes. And after working on the gut, and she also had SIBO, her pancreatic enzymes looked amazing, which we were shocked at because her pancreatic enzymes have been so low for years. Now, if you are not digesting proteins in particular, that is where we might see on the tiny health test a higher level of protein digestion in the large intestine and higher levels of something called TMA or trimethylamine, higher levels of ammonia. We don't want that. Okay. Proteins should be digested and absorbed in the small intestine. They should not be making their way down to the large intestine and feeding the large intestine because your large intestinal microbes, your beneficial ones, should be feeding on your fibers. And so if we see that, if I see a high protein digestion capacity in your large intestinal microbes, if I see a high TMA, which is highly inflammatory, or high ammonia, then I do want kids on digestive enzymes, especially before high protein meals, until we can, balance out their microbiome in general. Okay, Christina asked you, do you think there's a connection between gut health and growth potential? Yes, in the sense that if if there is an inflammatory component in the gut, inflammation just uses a lot more calories, for lack of a better way of saying it. So it's taking away from the nutrients that can be used for growth. Also, if your gut isn't absorbing nutrients well, then even if you're eating the cleanest and healthiest of diets, you're not going to be absorbing all of the nutrients you need for optimal growth. And so I think optimizing your gut health absolutely is essential for optimizing growth potential. The other thing that plays a huge role, is sleep. I mean, kids and adults are chronically sleep deprived, and we know kids do most of their growth in their sleep. I mean, most of our growth hormone is actually released while we're sleeping. And so that also too, that's a piece that a lot of kids kids can be resistant about that, right? But we need to make sure that we're optimizing sleep too. Okay. Michelle asks, this may be off topic. Tiny Health is my absolute favorite company. Will the opportunities for users to become small investors ever return? I'm going to leave that to Cheryl. I love that.
Yeah, like in our Series A, I think we had about 20% raised from users, actually. I've been thinking about when our next fundraising is. We are in a really good financial position, thanks to all of you. Really grateful for your support. We're growing with practitioners and providers and B2B distribution partnerships. But they may be an opportunity. And if there is, I will make sure that the Tiny Plus group will have first dips, so to speak. So definitely write in. We've had some practitioners even write in recently and ask for the opportunity to invest. So if you write in, even hello at Tiny Health, our team will get that email to me. And then I have this kind of a list that I'm saving. All right, so I guess we're kind of almost at time. So this is a good segue to sort of wrap up, and you should.
Or Cheryl, do you want me to answer I can go
Okay.
really quickly through the questions that were written in beforehand.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, there are. I just see some that just gonna plow through, guys, because
Okay.
we are at the end of time, but I want to make sure we get
Okay.
through a lot of them. So one of them was which I love, are fermented foods preferable to taking a probiotic supplement? And I would say fermented foods and fiber are going to be the best ways to support your gut microbiome for the long run, because there's so many benefits that fermented foods offer. And in fact, fermented foods in one study was actually found to increase microbiome diversity better than fiber alone. And remember, probiotic supplements that's just a part of the picture. The bugs are a piece of it. It's the ecosystem, right? Your microbiome is not just the microbes. It's the entire ecosystem in your gut that we need to restore and stay healthy. So just throwing tons of probiotics, in your gut is not going to be as beneficial. And how long does it take to restore lactobacillus when there's more bad bacteria than good? Well, I would say the better question is, how long does it take to restore beneficial bacteria? And it may not be that long, right? When you're changing diet and lifestyle and taking targeted supplements, it can be a matter. I usually want kids on a plan for a couple of months, and then I'll retest, but that can certainly be enough. Okay. I'm finding it hard to travel. What are the best ways to stay healthy while traveling? I think that's a really good question for the summer. When we're traveling, honestly, I would say just not to stress too much about it, right? We do our best. When you're going out, you can try to choose foods that, making sure that we're getting in, ideally, a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes while we're traveling. But sometimes when we're traveling, it's not possible. So just doing the best you can and really prioritizing. You may not have as much control over your food, but prioritizing sleep, I think, is essential when we're traveling. Usually when we're traveling, we're getting more exercise, which is great for your microbiome, right? And so, I mean, doing your best, but really, my biggest tip, just enjoy yourself. Don't stress about it. And then you can recover your microbiome when you get back. Um, and I guess this final question on weight gain and metabolism. My daughter's experiencing weight gain, especially around her waist. Are there simple recommendations to boost her metabolism and help her lose weight? I mean, this is where looking at the tiny health test, making sure there's enough akkermansia there for a healthy metabolic support is really important. When there's weight gain, especially around the waist, oftentimes that has to do with excess cortisol or stress hormone. So in that sense, working to see, are there some ways to reduce that excess cortisol. Sometimes I'll use, I might check a child's adrenal status, but really then working on, mindfulness, mind body tools, breath work, things that are going to engage her vagus nerve, because that's going to help support her microbiome and also reduce that excess kind of adrenal stress hormone to optimize her health and also her weight. Um, uh, Oh, and then this last question, and I don't have a water filter at home. What type of water should I use? I think spring water for baby formula is fine. Okay. If you don't have a filtered water. And then if your toddler, 13-month-old, wants to nurse more than eat, um, uh, and he only takes a few bites of food. We're co-sleeping and nursing through the night. Should I worry about his nutrition? So that's a really good question because a lot of that is going to be the case for some babies, right? Where they're just not that interested in food. My suggestion during the day is to always offer food first before nursing. Then, if it's at mealtime, right? Like at breakfast, when they wake, just try to have some food ready to offer that first. Um, if it's anything to, if they're thrusting their tongue, not seeming like they're kind of gagging or not able to handle the bites of food, then I would talk with your pediatrician to see, is there some maybe oromotor strengthening and tongue exercises that can be done, that can be worked through with an occupational therapist who specializes in feeding. But at 13 months, I just would want to keep making mealtime fun, not having any battles there, and really, at least once a day, trying to sit down, have them watch you, have a meal, and just have mealtime be a really pleasurable activity.
I'll quickly say Elizabeth Diamond, who asked if her baby has CMPA. There is, I think, your baby's condition section, a CMPA biomarker, so you can see if there's a lot of reds, and if so, then what you can do about it. But it's not diagnostic, just so you know. It's just a correlation.
I guess I would want to know what they base on. A lot of babies with cow's milk protein allergy, if your doctor ordered a calprotectin, it'll be, could be pretty high. Oftentimes we'll, as a pediatrician, we look for blood, microscopic blood in the stool. So, but honestly, the best way to know if dairy is causing or any food is causing the eczema is to take it away for 2 weeks, 100%. Like if you're nursing, I mean, even down to like the little splash of cream in your in your coffee, right? That's what we had to do with my son. And then for 2 weeks, and then see if it improves. And then we know, okay, it may not be an allergy, but there may be some, there's clearly a sensitivity, right? How do you in general recommend that babies that have eczema drink only breast milk from a gluten and dairy-free mom? Our son is adopted and didn't have the opportunity to breastfeed. Um, you're in an eczema program. I mean, that's a tough one because, I mean, for eczema, dairy and gluten can be big triggers, and that would be, if like if you were nursing, I would recommend going off for the time while we're trying to heal the baby's eczema. Um, so I mean, I would say if you're in the program, I would ask the coaches in the program what they recommend. But I might, if that seems to be a big trigger for your son's eczema, for instance, if you go on a hypoallergenic formula that doesn't have dairy and gluten and you see that his eczema clears, then I would probably consider, staying on the hypoallergenic formula and making sure that you're supplementing with a good omega, 3, and also an HMO prebiotic. Um, but again, I would, because of course there are other so many other benefits to breast milk than just the HMOs, but I would want to see if from the eczema program if that was something that would be necessary to stop. So do electrolyte salts disrupt the microbiome? I don't. It's interesting. I mean, in many of these electrolyte uh, that are on the market, of course, it's huge to have these hydration packets. I just think there's way too much sodium in many of them for most of us, right? In particular, I mean, the Element has so much sodium that, if you're going to have, one a day, that'd be maximum. And I do not recommend it for kids. It has so much sodium. And so, I mean, is that going to disrupt the gut microbiome? I don't know that there's any human studies on that, but I just think from an electrolyte standpoint, it's just not something that I recommend. I think the Cure coconut water based one, Ultima Replenisher. I mean, plain coconut water. You can actually, I have an electrolyte, a homemade electrolyte drink recipe in my book that's really easy to make. That's going to have a good balance of electrolytes in there without too much sodium. Most of us, unless we're ultra athletes and like, sweating out buckets, we really don't need that much sodium, guys. Okay. Um, uh, Breastfeeding VBAC, 1 round of antibiotics right before birth and one right after birth. 1-month-old baby. Should I test myself or my baby? How to decide who to test in the family just to reduce the risk of symptoms seen in parents before symptoms appear. I love this. So I would absolutely want to test you. I mean, now it's a month after delivery. You can test your gut microbiome for sure. And this would be a great time to test babies right now, just so that you can restore your microbiome, which is going to help when you're as you're breastfeeding, and support baby's gut microbiome. And then also we can take a look at how the baby's doing and make sure that the baby's gut microbiome is establishing well. So this is a perfect time to do gut microbiome testing for you and your baby, Maria. Okay. Um, is HMO similar to colostrum? So yes and no. I mean, colostrum has some HMOs in it, but colostrum is, of course, your first milk, and has, and even throughout our milk cycle as nursing moms, the HMO with many different kinds of HMOs, right? And so the types of HMOs are going to be different, even as we go through our nursing journey, but it's not the same. Right? If we're really using HMOs to seed and foster bifidobacteria growth, it should be an HMO supplement, not a colostrum supplement. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, because like I know there's a lot of brands now that market heavily, like Omra and Colostrum. There's Calba Colostrum. I heard from our science team that endotoxins in colostrum may persist. There are papers showing that, but I don't know. Like, there's not a whole lot of research, so just be kind of like cautious. Yeah, I think we would recommend HMOs over colostrum.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. A protocol for lowering Methanobrevibacter smithii. If you have high methane production, then I'm a little more suspicious. Could there be some methane SIBO? If you have symptoms, honestly, I like from here, I usually then have kids or adults do a Trio Smart breath test, because I want to know, is there some SIBO going on? Because SIBO is not necessarily the easiest to treat, and I don't want to embark on a huge, SIBO treatment regimen if I'm not sure. There's actually, if you have Smithie though, there's something called the food marble that seems to correlate really well with methane, and I think hydrogen sulfide SIBO. It for 2 of the gases, not all 3 of the gases. But it's literally after you eat, you kind of blow into this marble, the square that measures your gas levels, and that is, I think, easier than a 3-hour breath test. But so that might be something to consider, and then working with your doc to really have a good SIBO plan in place. All right. What is my thought on digestive enzymes for adults with IBS? I think they can be really helpful. A lot of IBS, may be triggered by food that is not as well digested and absorbed, and so then some of these larger food particles and antigens make it lower down where they can ferment and cause lots of different symptoms. So digestive enzymes can be amazing, and many people need especially adults will need a digestive enzyme with hydrochloric acid in it. And so, I mean, there are several on the market. The one I recommend for patients is Designs for Health has one called Digest Zymes. But there are many other ones, right? So these are just ones that I've used in the practice. It doesn't necessarily mean that those are the ones that you should use, but that is the one that I use. Okay. All right, so I see this. This what is Enterobacteriaceae? Enterobacteriaceae is a category of bacteria that has under it many different kinds of bacteria, and these particular kinds of bacteria are typically disruptive. We don't want them there. Okay, so they are ones like E. coli and Klebsiella and Citrobacter and Proteus, and these are bacteria that tend to produce something called endotoxins or LPS. Okay. And so in your test, you'll see if there's high levels of Enterobacteriaceae, we often see on the next inflammatory section, high levels of something called hexa LPS. And if your if your LPS is high, that can trigger all sorts of autoimmune concerns, mental health concerns, a lot of chronic inflammatory conditions. And so, if with that, I would want to get rid of the Enterobacteriaceae, whether you're using herbs or antibiotics. And then I reduce the LPS by using something called serum derived bovine immunoglobulin, SBI. Okay, so that's how I do that. And in fact, I've had this one case that I share in presentation is a kiddo, 10-year-old who had ADHD, anxiety, OCD, I mean, you name it. And we got rid of her Enterobacteriaceae and used the serum-derived bovine immunoglobulin to clear her LPS. And I mean, within a month, her parents were saying she's a different kid. So that is how powerful working on the gut-brain connection can be.
Oh, quickly answer Ashley's thoughts on safety of eating fermented raw foods during pregnancy. So many mixed messages. I would highly recommend you read Lily Nichols' Real Food for Pregnancy. She has a lot of good information about this specific topic. I drank raw milk and I ate raw fermented foods and even sushi. But definitely don't take my advice as medical advice. But Lily Nichols has evidence-based recommendations there. It's actually perfectly safe in her opinion. The benefits outweigh the risk, but of course it will be some sort of baseline risk, right? But I would say read that book.
Okay, so being newer to the more holistic lifestyle, what are the other best next steps beyond microbiome testing that you'd recommend? So when a patient comes to me, my foundational testing is microbiome testing, tiny health testing for sure. I often will do an organic acid test and blood testing. Now, the reason I will sometimes do the organic acid test is because for some kids, it's a little harder to do blood testing, right? But I always want to know, on top of the basics are the blood testing and the microbiome testing, because are there nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies that we need to optimize? And are there gut imbalances that we need to optimize? And when you pair those things together, we can get phenomenal results. And the blood testing will typically, be, and so guys, look to, I'm creating, a handout on optimal tests, blood testing and functional tests for kids, and with optimal levels, but they'll include things like a zinc, magnesium, iron, vitamin D, all the things that are really commonly deficient and we don't know unless we measure. Just like with your microbiome, we have no idea what your child's microbiome looks like unless we actually test, which is why testing is so important. Okay.
Okay, sir. Unfortunately, my son just woke up. You might hear him cry. I have to go soon. It's already 15 minutes over. I'm so grateful. Dr. Elisa Song has gracefully, generously stayed back to answer all your questions. I know there's a couple more we didn't get through, but you are a Tiny Plus member, and we will have more of these sessions. So yes, I think you should have already seen a short questionnaire pop up. If you haven't already taken that survey, you can still go to that top right corner to take the survey, and we will draw one of your names to get Dr. Elisa's book. How amazing is that? So yes, your feedback will help us shape the next webinars that are most relevant and helpful. Any closing thoughts, Elisa, before you can hear my son crying.
No, go to London. I can wrap up.
It's okay.
No, I'm grateful, guys, for you being here, and hopefully this was helpful.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye,
All
guys.
right. Bye. This is so fun.